All right, we'll call this meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. First item agenda then will be roll call. Mark, Miss Cicely, Eric, Miss Kendra. We also have Rosalie Mahan and our consultant Amanda Harrington. For those of you in the audience, if you intend to speak, make sure you're signed up to speak. Okay. You should have in your packet the minutes from the December 8th meeting. So I'll give you a minute to review those and then entertain a motion to approve.
Limited. Expansion is constrained by drainage systems and topography. Highway 25 already carries heavy commuter traffic connecting from Carthage, Lafayette, and Kentucky. Increased density means increased congestion, higher accident rate, and accelerated road deterioration. Rezoning farmland adds another long-term cost. Communities like Lebanon are now losing farmland at an alarming rate. Tennessee is roughly losing 10 acres per hour, roughly 200 acres daily to development. Reports estimate we will lose 2 million acres of farmland by 2027, according to the Tennessee Institute of Agriculture. Farmers cannot compete with development prices, and generational farms are disappearing. Once farmland is gone, it does not return. Planning decisions today permanently reshape the community. I have seen firsthand what overcrowding and overpopulation mean. It increases crime, strained infrastructure, higher taxes, pollution, overwhelmed emergency services, overburdened hospitals and schools, waste management issues, resource scarcity, higher unemployment, rising poverty, and a shift from home ownership to investor-driven rentals. We are not opposed to growth, but growth must be phased, data-driven, and aligned with infrastructure capacity. Planning cannot be reactive. You cannot approve development and hope that tax revenue will eventually catch up. By then, infrastructure is already behind and residents are already paying the cost. Hartsville was not designed to function as a high-density city. It is a rural community with limited infrastructure resources and a distinct character worth preserving. I urge this commission to prioritize capacity, sequencing, and substantiability in every zoning and development decision. Once these approvals are granted, the consequences are irreversible. I would also like to add, maybe for rezoning, since rezoning takes place in the beginning, where we could post it. I don't know where it gets posted. I don't think anybody reads a newspaper anymore. But maybe on a social media website where it could actually get posted and visible to street, because the streets and the houses are so far apart. They're usually really, really close to the homes and you can't see it as you're driving by. So maybe that could be something where the community could see it in, on social media somewhere, since that's what everyone's been using. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is old business. Any old business? I don't think so. So then it would be new business. And the first item on the new business is the setback variance for Green Top. So, Mr. Matthew, anything you want to tell us about this?
Good evening. Of course, I think most of you are familiar with the lot that we discussed last meeting. And since we determined that this body cannot allow the dividing of that lot, we would like to ask for a setback variance strictly just for the sides. To go from a 15-foot setback to a 10-foot setback. This is an older lot, as we discussed last meeting. I think this lot was developed back in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. And so by allowing us to do that, it just makes for a little bit more of an appealing building lot. We can stretch the structure wider versus having to go, straight up, so to speak. So we like to ask for a variance on side setbacks only from 15 feet to 10 feet.
My notes say 1954 is the plat of record, and of course the ordinance that we're working with right now is 1999. I don't think we even had planning and zoning till 1974. So, any questions, Miss Amanda? Do you want to give us your comments?
Sure. The typical setbacks for R2 zone property are 30 foot in the front, 15 in the side, and 20 foot in the rear, as Mr. Carmen said. The applicant is seeking the smallest variance possible to achieve the stated purpose of development, and the request is not out of line compared to the average of the other setbacks in the area, so staff respectfully recommends granting of the variance.
Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
I'd like to speak to the site plan that they had submitted along with this request. You can see it's this one right here where it shows where the house is going to be located. So you've got the 30-foot setback from Foxhall. You've got the 10 there on the side. And then you've got 20 back here on Green Top. That will also need to be 30 because it's road frontage. So anytime there's road frontage on either side of the lot, you'll need to meet that.
Does that mean that the 20-foot variance request would need to be handled separately?
No, they just showed that as a site plan. So it's not, that's already in our ordinances, what needs to happen. If you've got two road frontages, you need to. Right, and they just didn't remember that the road frontage, it still has to be considered as front. There will be. Mm-hmm.
So I'm imagining the reason why we had 15 setback on each side of the property is so there would be a total of 30 foot between the homes. Is that ideally based off of a 15 foot off of this property line, 15 foot off the other property line?
And there's like a set width for a property. And this is just, it's a lot of record, so it doesn't quite meet that. That's why they need to have the side setback variance. And I agree with Amanda Harrington with her assessment that I would also recommend approval.
Just out of curiosity, what would be the distance between the existing homes on this property?
I don't know that I could speak directly to that. On one side, there's an existing vacant lot, so there is no home. But I will tell you on the other side, we had a very similar situation where we had an extremely old dilapidated house we tore down. That house is probably within 5 or 6 feet because we were allowed to build back in the original envelope because it was a building of, you know, a lot of record and had an existing structure. So there would just be one to that one side right there.
And as we've referenced before, fire code dictates that you need to have 10 feet in between structures just for safety's sake and not having, fire spread and everything. So with the 10-foot from the side property lines, more than meet that.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny.
I make a motion to approve the setback variance to 10 foot for Green Top Street.
I'll second.
So I have a motion to approve the variance, motion by Mark, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, moving on, I guess we're up to the training portion then. So Miss Amanda, I think it's you.
All right, so tonight's training is called Why Site Plans Matter in the Development Process. So what is a site plan and why do we care? Those are the two fundamental questions that we're dealing with tonight. So a site plan is the technical drawing that shows how a development will function on the ground, not just what zoning district is in. So just like the application that we just considered, they submitted a site plan with that. That's what this drawing was that was in your packet. This is the site plan. It answers where things go, how people will get in and out of the site, how impacts are managed, and whether the proposal will match adopted regulations and plans. Zoning will tell you what's allowed to go in a particular site. The site plan shows you how it will actually work on the site. What Tennessee law expects. So under Tennessee Code Annotated, planning commissions are responsible for ensuring compliance with zoning ordinances, applying subdivision regulations, implementing the adopted comprehensive plan, and reviewing development impacts before construction begins. As a Board of Zoning Appeals, there are going to be times where you all may look at a site development plan first. If somebody is coming to you to review a certain variance, or if there is a certain special exception or something is coming before you all that involves the site plan, then you all would be the ones that are responsible, the gatekeepers, for looking at the site plan. And for ensuring the compliance with the zoning ordinance. So even though this training may seem like it's oriented more toward planning commissioners, it's very much intended for Board of Zoning Appeals members as well, because you all will be in the position of having to evaluate site plans yourselves. So don't get too discouraged and tune out when you see planning commissions. Just remember that it involves you all as well. So why do site plans matter legally? So a site plan is the official record of what it was approved. It's the basis for permits and inspections, and it's the documents that's used if a decision is challenged in court. If it's not on a site plan, it's very difficult to enforce later. Okay, so there can be a lot of discussion sometimes at meetings that happen when you're going through an approval process or on a development plan, and there can be some back and forth. There can be some conditions of approval. We've talked about those before. If you recall in some of in your previous trainings, where you all may look at a site plan and go, okay, we might be okay with that, but we really want you to have two-way traffic coming in this way, and we want you to have a turn lane to the right going out this way or whatnot. And the applicant is up there furiously taking notes, and everybody on the staff side is furiously taking notes, trying to make sure that we get it in the meeting minutes to be sure that it actually translates into a plan. One or two of those are not horrible to have, as conditions of approval, but when you start getting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, it becomes an issue of compliance. And again, when you get into a matter of a he said, she said versus your meeting minutes versus what's on the site plan, at the end of the day in court, your judge is going to be looking at what's on the site plan. They may or may not take into consideration what are in your official meeting minutes, but at the end of the day, your site plan, that stamp and sealed site plan, is what's going to carry the record. So I say all that to tell you all that it's okay to slow down sometimes. If we get into a situation where there are a lot of conditions of approval or there's just a lot of things wrong with the site plan, they didn't meet a checklist item or 10. It's okay to say, I think we need to defer this for a month to give the applicant time to put together a complete proposal. Because again, if it's not on the site plan, it's very difficult to enforce later. So it's better to slow down and get it right the first time than it is to try to scramble and try to collect from everybody's notes on what we were doing. On your next page, site plans protect the community. Impacts a site plan reveal early are very, very telling. A good site plan will allow commissioners and boards to evaluate traffic and access safety, pedestrian and bicycle movement, stormwater drainage, building placement and compatibility, buffers to adjacent neighborhoods, emergency access and service access. It's the resident in the audience was talking about, parking layout and circulation. Without a site plan, problems surface after construction. The community bears the cost and the commission loses leverage. Because once it's already left this building, Elvis has left the building. There is no getting him back. There are some ways that you can stop a site plan once it's left the building, but that becomes very difficult to do. And Rosalie could probably speak to that much better than I could with stop work orders and things like that. But that could be a whole training session unto itself. But just suffice it to say that it's very difficult once a site plan has been approved to try to stop things once they're in motion. So again, it's better to slow down, take your time with the site plan. Developers will always tell you that the sky is falling and everything has to happen right now. That's not always the case. It could be the best development in the world. It could bring millions of dollars to your community. It could bring millions of jobs, thousands of jobs, good paying jobs. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to slow down to get it right the first time. So if there's nothing that you leave here with tonight, it's okay to slow down because you're a quasi judicial board. I've got to work that in every time. Okay. Site plans protect property owners and neighbors. Why the neighbors care? Neighbors don't generally object to development. They object to headlights shining into homes and trucks using residential streets and flooding caused by poor grading and noise and visual impacts and parking spillover. These are all issues that are site plan issues. They're not zoning issues. They're site development issues. And these are all things that could be that are very evident on a site plan. Sometimes they're not completely obvious. You could get a commercial development in and who knew that it was going to be the best thing since sliced bread, and it could be wildly successful and there's just never enough parking. They can meet their parking minimums and there's still not enough parking out there. What a great problem to have. Unfortunately, that's not something that can be foreseen on the commission side. So there are some things that are just not able to be foreseen. And there are some things that you can't plan for. You cannot plan for everything. It's just not possible. And do not try to plan for everything. planning is not black and white. It's all different shades of gray. And it's very uncomfortable for people sometimes to live in those shades of gray. But you've got to try your best to do that. There are guidance documents. There's guidance within your zoning resolution that we'll get into here that's going to help you hopefully help get you more comfortable and acclimated as time goes on. The Planning Commission value, the site plan stage is often the only opportunity to address compatibility, and it's the moment when design changes are still feasible. You know, you can't send somebody out in the world and say, here, go build this building, and then halfway they're done with everything they're about to put the finishing touches on, and then bring it back in here and say, yeah, we don't like that. We want you to change it, tear it down, change it again. You can't do that. Site plans protect the developer. Yes, really, they really do. A common misconception is that developers sometimes view site plans as hurdles. I don't think it's so much the site plan. I think it's the time that it takes for the site plans to get through. Again, time is money, right? Yeah. In reality, a clear, well-reviewed site plan reduces redesign costs later, prevents permit delays, creates certainty for financing, protects against neighbor complaints, and limits disputes with inspectors. Again, I'm sure Ms. Rosalie has tons of stories that she can tell you about going on inspections and are things where they're supposed to be and getting out the measuring tape and all sorts of things. But a strong site plan approval is a form of risk management. And that's something that I want you guys to really work on when you get your packets and you're looking at site plans and things like that. It's not just, you know, what's this cool thing that's coming to town? You're looking at it, it's a tool. It's really a management tool. And you're looking at those items such as traffic flow and congestion and, you know, those sort of things. Because it's risk management for the community. Site plans implement the comprehensive plan. Connecting policy to reality. Comprehensive plans will talk about connectivity between streets, walkability, corridor design, compatibility, and infrastructure capacity. Site plans are where those goals happen or don't. Right? So you get a site plan in that shows sidewalk, right? Where sidewalks are required. Well, there's no sidewalk over here and there's no sidewalk over here, but your regulations require there to be a sidewalk. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to make me build a sidewalk to nowhere. Yes, we are. Because it starts somewhere. You have to start it somewhere. Now, I could get into the intricacies of sidewalk improvement funds and bonding and escrow funds and things like that, but I'm not going to do that to you tonight. So no worries there. But for example, if the comprehensive plan calls for multimodal corridors, multimodal meaning multi-modes of traffic, so walking, biking, vehicular traffic, reduced curb cuts, pedestrian connectivity, those policies only matter if the commission requires them as site plan review. Comprehensive plans mean absolutely nothing if they're not going to be implemented as site plan. Mean absolutely nothing. So what happens when site plans are weak? Common outcomes, you get unsafe access points, poor drainage, incompatible building placement, legal nonconformities created unintentionally, grandfather problems that cannot be fixed later, public frustration with the Planning Commission or Board of Zoning Appeals. Key warning, approving a weak site plan often locks in a problem permanently. Mr. Carmen was speaking earlier about a development that he did where a house was actually taken down and they were able to rebuild in the same place, in the same footprint. That's a legal non-conforming grandfather privilege for that particular piece of property that he was referring to. Now, I don't know any details, so I'm not going to say anything more than that. But that can go into building compatibility. The question that you had, well, how far away is the house going to be from other houses? You know, those are exactly the right kind of questions to be asking. You don't want to end up inadvertently creating more nonconformities, especially in areas where you have legal lots of record. It used to be in the early 1900s, 1900, 1950, 1960, that you would be able to buy pieces of property that were in strips, right? They were 10 by 10 or whatnot. And then someone could go and they could pick out, I want 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. They didn't even bother consolidating them. They just bought them and then put a house right down in the middle of them. Well, obviously that kind of flies in the face of what we do now, but we still have situations in neighborhoods where those are created. So those are the kind of legal non-conforming. They were legal at the time it happened. They're just non-conforming now. So those are the reasons that we have to be really careful when we look at site plans that come in, and especially in areas that are older in town, and be sure that, with these legal non-conforming uses, that we're not approving any new ones and we're not making any current legal non-conforming ones worse. Right? Okay, we remember that from our other trainings. Okay. So site plan review versus rezoning, knowing the difference is really important. Rezoning is a legislative action. It's a broad policy decision in which the deciders are asking, is this use appropriate here? Usually you have very few details in what you're deciding on, and it's very hard to condition. In Tennessee, conditional zoning is not, I'm not going to say it's illegal, but it's not common either. So I'm going to say it's kind of borderline. You don't get that very often. As opposed to a site plan, which is administrative and quasi-judicial, my favorite term. You look for technical compliance. You're looking for the question, is this designed correctly? There's a high level of detail and conditions are critical. So you want to be sure that when you're looking at these things, that you're not just focusing on the zoning and the use of a site plan. If it's got a site plan, you're pretty well assured that the use is already appropriate. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gotten to you. Rosalie or myself would have flagged it and would have said, no, this is not an appropriate use. You would never see it before you at all. A rezoning does not approve a layout. I want to talk about rezonings just for a second. So with rezonings, there are sometimes people will put together exhibits that go with your rezoning requests. I choose to believe that people have the best intentions. I just choose to believe to go through life that way. It's gotten me a couple of times, but I still choose to believe that. And I say that to say that at the end of the day, somebody can give you an exhibit with a rezoning that shows the best site plan, that shows, the best plan, the best details, the best laid plan you've ever seen, and it could never come to fruition. They are not legally bound to do it. Not at a rezoning.
Okay. Site plan.
Right. Not at a rezoning. At a site plan, they do, but not at a rezoning. So when you see exhibits, if you ever go to a planning commission meeting or a county commission meeting and you're looking at a rezoning packet and you see a site plan, I hate to say it this way, but kind of take it with a grain of salt. The intentions are good. I believe that the people are going to do that. I believe that they're going to carry through with their plans, but there's nothing that's legally binding them to do it. With rezoning, whatever it gets changed to, whatever those uses are. Remember Rosalie talked about this in one of her trainings, I think a couple of months ago before Christmas. Whatever the zone is approved for, whatever use, that use can go in that zone when that zone is changed. On the flip side, when it's approved, when the use is a use permitted by right or not, and if it comes to you guys for approval, which we'll talk about that because there's been a change in state law on that one too. But I'm limited on time. So, but when it comes to site plan approval, that is where rubber meets the road. If there's something on a site plan, you better believe that they're legally required to put into play everything that they've got down on their site plan. There's no, oh, we'll put it down just to get the planner to shut up. We'll put the landscaping planner, we'll put the landscape plans in there because we know the planner likes to look at trees. Yeah, she likes to look at trees, but you're also gonna plant every single one of them out there. Okay. So that's the big difference. I just want to really impress that upon you. Rezoning, take a site plan. It is what it is. It's an exhibit.
Is there any sort of, I know that there's no legal requirements or anything like that. Is there anything inside of our own ordinances or anything that we can start implementing more stringent compliance with that type of stuff when they submit for a rezone? Like, it's not established yet. Is that
Mhm.
something that we could establish?
So really, there's not. I mean, you can, but it's not going to, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to have a whole lot of teeth. You
Okay.
can ask them for for an exhibit, but if someone is pushing, okay, fine, I'm going to put a car wash there. They may intend to put a bookstore, but at the time, all they can think about is, well, I don't know, I guess I'll put a car wash.
What about in terms of, like the lady said earlier, in terms of maintaining, so if someone were to submit for a rezone of agriculture to R2,
Mhm.
they would have to still at that point of the deciding to change that, look at the infrastructure impact, the grid impact, the drainage impact, and all that other type of stuff at that time, right?
Not for a rezoning,
No.
no.
So what do they consider in general as far as deciding to change those things?
So what they look at for rezoning is they'll look at what's around the property. So they look at the zoning that's around the property. They'll look at the uses that are around the property. Let me put it this way, the Planning Commission has very little discretion in recommending rezonings up to the county commission. I think both of us, I think Rosalie and I have both made this point. The county commission has a much broader brush when it comes to rezonings. Okay, so at the planning commission level, what they're going to be looking at, what they should be looking at, and what the staff report would direct them to look at are the zoning classifications of properties that are around them. They'll be looking at the uses of property around, because something could be zoned ag, but it's being used as commercial. The zoning and your use don't always match up. And that's often a cause of confusion for people as well. Somebody sees something that's being used as commercial, they think is zone commercial when it's really not. So that's what the planning commission would be looking at in terms of rezoning. With a site plan, that's when you would start looking at things like drainage and that sort of thing. When it gets to the county commission, if you're looking at a rezoning for a development of 300, 500 homes, then yes, that's something that they could take that into consideration. Is that area prime for that sort of thing? But your county attorney at that point, Mr. Beller, would then probably speak up and say, now, remember, we're talking about the rezoning, not development plan. And that's what I said earlier in here, is that the site plan, that's the difference between the rezoning and the site plan. The rezoning, you don't get a lot of that technical information because that developer that's coming in with 300 units may have the best engineering team in this side of the Mississippi. And they could come in with this great plan to solve all the drainage problems that Hartsville Trousdale has ever encountered. And my gosh, where has he been all of our lives, right? Or she. So I don't know if I answered your question. Okay, I answered it as black and white as I could.
So in my summary, the way that my mind hears that is that the zoning committee, the planning committee is more about making sure that it makes sense as a flow of the city.
Right.
To have commercial by commercial, residential by residential, and they're making sure that it's cohesive as functions, not necessarily plans or compliance and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They take the 65,000 foot view looking down. Like, does this make sense in the overall? And then with a general plan, or comprehensive plan that you've got, yes, when you take a look at that and you go, okay, in the future, 25 years from now, what is this area intended to look like? Does this rezoning application support that vision of what it looks like 20 years from now or 25 years from now?
Right.
And that's something that could get factored into a decision as well. Yep. Okay. Any other questions before we keep going? Yes,
Could
sir.
you briefly, talk about like, a site plan, for like, remodels and additions? You still, need a site plan for them?
So I will defer to Rosalie on the remodels. For additions, if they're small additions, I'm not sure what the county or what we require. So I'll defer.
So when you're looking at remodels or adding additions to homes, part of the building permit process, and we've talked about that before, there's different criterias that you have to meet, and a site plan is one of those. We utilize that to make sure that setbacks are being met, that people aren't building on their septic field. They're not building on someone else's septic field, because sometimes there are septic easements and you can't do anything with those because that has someone else's septic in there. So that's part of the permitting process, and that absolutely gets looked at, and we have to have that type of site plan. Now, do we have to have it drawn by a surveyor? Not necessarily so. We could have it drawn out on like the TN property viewer, where they're giving us where the house is going to be, where the driveway is going to be, because that also helps the 911 commission establish what their new address is going to be, for emergency service purposes. So does that answer your question?
Okay. So what planning commissioners should be looking for and what BZA members should be looking for. So some core questions to ask. Does the plan comply with adopted ordinances? Are access points safe and logical? Does traffic flow make sense internally? Are pedestrians protected? Is stormwater handled responsibly? Are adjacent properties buffered appropriately? Is the plan consistent with adopted policies? What commissioners are not doing, and this is what's very difficult to remember sometimes, they're not designing the project. It's like those commercials when homeowners become their parents. Yeah. You're not designing the project as much as you want to. You are not designing the project for them. You're not choosing architectural styles unless required. You're not rewriting the ordinance, and you're not negotiating private business terms.
When that says unless required, what would make that required?
If you had a design review manual that required it.
Some towns require every building to match an architectural style.
Okay, so like also, what is it, like sub cul-de-sacs, or what's it called? Suburban, what am I? Where the homes are all together, they have like a HOA.
Oh, like an HOA.
Would that be part of this or no?
No,
Okay.
no, because that HOA is the only,
No,
so
I meant like more of like the aesthetics guidelines established by the HOA. Is it
Mhm.
similar to this, where that neighborhood has an established aesthetics that need to be done, or
No,
that's
no.
because it's a separate neighborhood thing?
that would be separate.
Okay.
This is what I'll say about HOAs. The only interest that a government has in an HOA is who's going to take care of the roads and who's going to take care of stormwater
Mm.
infrastructure. Those are the only two things that a government entity should care about with an HOA. We don't care about the size of the mailbox. We don't care about the color of the front door. We don't care about whether there's a gazebo or what. We don't get generally into those types of details. What HOAs are there for, when we asked to get copies of draft restrictive covenants, is to ensure that the infrastructure is being maintained by the proper entities. We don't get into the architectural details. Yeah. like that.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
We've mentioned stormwater and drainage a lot. Should we be looking at that, or should that be brought out to us on all the things we decide on?
Yes, it should be reviewed, and it is being reviewed, I believe.
So, and that's one of the things too, that the planning commission looks at when there are in a subdivision that comes forward, and a subdivision is just a dividing of property into lots. What are the stormwater directives there? Are they being met? Because the only place right now that stormwater is addressed is in our subdivision ordinances. And the Codes and Zoning Committee will be looking at adopting and putting together, well, they're not adopting it, but they're going to be putting together stormwater ordinance that goes for, say, if it's just one construction site there, that's going to be met as well. We don't have anything in our general ordinance that deals with stormwater other than what the state has as far as laws are concerned.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So conditions of approval are a critical tool. Why conditions matter? Excuse me. Conditions tie approval to specific design elements. They provide enforceability, they clarify expectations, and they protect the commission legally. Remember what I was saying, one or two conditions of approval, that's manageable. When you start getting into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or a couple pages worth, I've seen it. That becomes, in my opinion, that's an incomplete submittal. And that, in my opinion, and my recommendation would be to defer to give the applicant time to get their act together and kind of button up some things. Examples of appropriate conditions: access shall be limited to one driveway as shown. Sidewalk connection shall be constructed prior to CO, certificate of occupancy. Landscape buffer shall be installed per sheet C3. No additional curb cuts permitted without amendment. Conditions should reference the site plan sheets whenever possible. This referencing of the sheets of site plan sheets whenever possible becomes really important, especially when you're looking at larger projects and you get multiple versions of the same project going on. There's usually a little box that goes on the bottom of the site plan that tracks revisions. And sometimes we're not very good, we planners are not very good about holding engineers or surveyors' feet to the fire in terms of recording all of the different revision dates in those boxes. But that's really, really important so that you can keep track of what version you're dealing with. Especially if you're dealing with somebody on an applicant that doesn't have great organizational skills. It gets all confused and, which version are we looking at? Does everyone have the same one? It gets really fun when everybody's looking at a different version at the same meeting. That gets really fun. So conditions should reference the site plan sheets whenever possible. Amendments are not a failure. Amendments to a site plan is their normal process. It's a reality of development. Site plans often change due to engineering constraints, utility conflicts, and market conditions. The commission's role is to require formal amendments, ensure changes don't create new impacts, and maintain a clean public record. So there are some times where there can be small amendments that would be written into your regulation if something is, I don't know, less than 3,000 square feet or less than 10% of the overall total gross leasable space, then something can be amended administratively. Sometimes those types of regulations will be in your resolution. I don't know what yours specifically says. I didn't research it. But, as long as there is a process, it's better to go ahead and have them come back to Planning Commission and go through the public process and get your amendment done in the light of day and on the record so that everybody is aware of the changes and everybody knows what's going on. Again, that's one of those things where you might get a little bit of pushback that we're taking too long. Time is money, right? But again, it's better sometimes to slow down and get it right than it is to rush through and just try to be a good friend, good neighbor, good business partner, whatever, and just, oh, okay, fine. All right. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. So best practices for a strong site plan review. For planning commissions, using a standardized site plan checklist, requiring clear legible plans, asking staff for a written analysis, focus on ordinance standards, and avoiding last minute approvals without review. For staff, having pre-application meetings, clear submittal requirements, written staff reports, and conditions drafted in advance. So that's what we try to do with the staff reports that we provide to you. And of course, I know Rosalie's office is always open to anybody who has questions that, you can call and ask. And if you've got any questions about the applications that are coming through. I want to touch on the site plan checklist. There's a site plan checklist in your zoning resolution for both the city and the county that are used in project review. I'm not making things up when I go through and I'm putting in the site plan checklist that I use. I always put in my site plan, in my reports, that the application was reviewed using the site plan checklist in, and then I cite the document. I cite where you can find the document. Yep. And that sort of thing. If there are a couple of comments, again, maybe a landscaping plan is missing. I always say that because that's the one that's always left at the end. Everybody always waits to the end to do a landscaping plan and then they forget about it. But, is a landscaping plan really enough to turn down a project? Well, it depends. It depends, doesn't it? Depends on what the project is. Right? So, there have been times where people have said, well, how come you recommended, approval when they were missing their landscaping plan, but you didn't on the other one? Well, it all depends on what the project is. So you've got to read through and you've got to look for the context of the report and the context of the project in terms of what the recommendations may or may not be. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. It sure is. So the closing message to my commissioners will be: a strong site plan review protects the public, it protects property owners, protects developers, it protects the planning commission, and most importantly, it turns adopted plans and ordinances into reality. And that's all I've got for you presentation wise on this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is report for the chairman. Chairman has nothing at this point, so we'll move on to report from the building official. I'm sure she's been bored the last month. Nothing going on, right?
Actually, still lots going on. All the houses that have been started, now they're getting to the final stages. And you'll be seeing a lot of houses being bought and moved into. So there are more. Just want to follow up on all the things that are happening in the county with the Enbridge gas pipeline project. I know that you're seeing a lot of different, we've talked about Boat Dock Road and the compressor station. We've talked about the solar array. They've done a lot of grading, a lot of site prep, and they're working on things. You've also noticed too that they are starting to move through the county, laying the new pipe. And if you have driven on 25 going to Carthage, where the old racetrack is, you'll see a lot of large, long green pipe. That is the pipe that is being laid. So they are moving through the county now and going through that. So you may hear blasting noises as well as what they've been doing up there on Boat Dock, is because they will go through all the way through Trousdale County up through Kingsport to East Tennessee, which is now, this is the East Tennessee gas pipeline. So if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, please don't hesitate. Remember, I still have all of that information there at the office. You can come and look at it. I'll have information on who you can contact if you need to talk with somebody about a concern that you have that I'm not able to address.
Thank you. Anybody on the commission have any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion by Eric,
Second.
second by Mark. We have a motion and a second to adjourn, so we're adjourned.